Then I think we can get started. And I see people in the chat are reacting as well, so that's great. So welcome to this relatively short event that we're having on our progress on the Trustworthy AI Assessment Tool project that we launched already 2 years ago. This will not be a very long event, but we do wanted to give you an update on how this project functions and where we stand and give you a demo. So that's on the agenda today. Let me pull up my slides, and while I do so, for those of you who don't know me, I maybe briefly introduce myself. So I'm Nathalie Smuha. I'm a researcher at the Leuven Faculty of Law. And I'm speaking here today as my capacity of also board member of AI4Belgium AI Ethics and Law Working Group. And today with me, I have Alain Coletta from BOSA. Alain, maybe you can introduce yourself briefly too.
Sure. So I'm a project manager at BOSA, and I'm in charge of the development of the ethical AI assessment tool. And yeah, we're a team of developers and computer scientists and machine learning specialists building the tool. So, welcome.
Thank you, Alain. And so indeed, Alain is helping to create this tool. So as I said, what's on the agenda today is that I'll just give a brief overview of where we stand, how we got here, what the purpose of the tool is and what it is not. And then Alain will give a demonstration of the tool as it stands today. So it's still in development, but we are starting to reach the last stretches, if I may say so. So you'll see that. And then it would be lovely to have feedback from you on how you think the tool functions and what you think can still be improved based on this demo. Okay, so without much further ado, let me first of all also introduce the other members of the Ethics and Law Board of AI4Belgium, because Alain and I are not the only ones working on this. These are all the board members. Well, we're a great team actually working together on this project. So how did we get here? What is this project about? First of all, when the high-level expert group ethics guidelines for trustworthy AI came out, first edition already in 2019, and then a reiteration in 2020, we got a lot of good feedback from people in the Belgian ecosystem and beyond, saying that it's great to have a tool that helps you reflect on the ethical issues of AI. But it's not always the most user-friendly because it's just a PDF document. There was also a sort of rough tool online that was accessible, but it was not a very collaborative tool, so it was not user-friendly and people did not really feel like working with it. So we saw an opportunity here to develop a tool based on the high-level expert group's assessment list. So we are not fundamentally changing these questions, but just to make it easier for people to navigate through this long list of questions, basically. And so we started off this project already in March 2021. So 2 years ago, at the very first, was then the Belgian AI Week still. We had a plenary session in which we laid down our plan and said, look, we want to develop this tool, but we're going to need input from the entire AI community as to what would make this tool successful. And so work then started. Between June and November of that year, we did a lot of workshops specifically focusing on 3 sectors. So we opted to start with focusing on 3 sectors because we wanted to see what are the main differences in terms of how the assessment list questions should be tailored to specific contexts and sectors. And healthcare sector, HR and public services seemed like very good candidates because these are contexts where there are certain ethical sensitivities, or perhaps more than in other sectors. So we engaged in in-depth workshops with people from the terrain there. And then we also did follow-up workshops and validation meetings to make sure that what we had understood in terms of feedback of what they needed was correct. We also did that with people who worked on the original assessment list, meaning experts from the high-level expert group themselves, who borrowed their time in order to see whether the mock-ups that we were preparing and the idea for the tool that we had made sense. Now, exactly a year ago, we presented the concept of the tool that we had worked on for a year, and we also showed the first mock-ups of how the tool could potentially look like. And that's also when the development process started to kick in, and where Alain and his team came on board as well. And so here today, what we would like to do is show you now a demo of the tool in development. And then at the end of this session, just collect some feedback from you. You can do that in the chat, but you can also, of course, send us an email afterwards with further feedback before we want to truly launch this tool. And the idea for this tool is for it to be open source and for it to be free of use for everyone. Also those organizations and companies that don't have the budget to hire a team of lawyers or compliance experts to make sure that their AI is trustworthy. So what were the requirements that we set out at the start for this tool to be? First of all, we wanted the tool to be illustrative, meaning that it gives some examples and clearly understandable definitions of the terms that were used by the high-level expert group. We also wanted to try to make the tool more proactive, because many of the questions in the assessment list were formulated as, did you take into account? Did you consider? But if you only reply to these questions at the very end of a project, the design is already kicked in and it might be too late to make sure that also the design is ethical. So we wanted to reverse that and make sure that from the very start of an AI project, you're taking these ethical considerations into account. The idea was also that you could reply to the questions of this assessment list in an iterative basis, because perhaps you have no question at the very beginning for a given answer because you first need to collect stakeholder feedback and you want to come back to it later. Or maybe you want to develop your answer along the way because you took different steps to meet the requirements of that question. We also found it important for the tool to be collaborative. So that means that different people, ideally from multiple disciplines, can work together on the tool and in replying these questions, because there are clearly questions that will be much easily answered by lawyers and questions that would require rather a technical expertise. So we needed to find a way to make sure that they could talk with each other, also literally in the tool, to answer the questions together. And also to do this in an asynchronous manner, meaning I answer one question in the morning and maybe you follow up on this next week, and all of that should be visible in the tool. The tool also needs to be informative. So if you say no to a certain question that is important, ideally it should also point out certain answers or solutions that you should be looking at in order to ensure that you fulfill the requirements. And then this was also a very important one. We wanted to make sure that the tool allows you to document the steps that you take and have a sort of assessment score of how well you are meeting the questions that need to be answered, just in terms of ensuring there is a trace of your work, of your compliance work, and also for transparency and traceability of your actions. And then if all of that was not enough yet, we also wanted the tool to be user-friendly, despite all the requirements that I just mentioned. So it needs to be easy to use, relatively intuitive, and also easily integrable in other already existing work management tools. Now, before I hand it over to Alain, I also want to stress what the tool is not meant to do. Because remember, this is based on the high-level expert group's assessment list. This is not based, for instance, on the AI Act, which is not yet final in any case. So it's not a legal tool. And so as such, it's not meant for legal compliance. So the idea is not that if you fulfill all the questions in this tool, that you can say, I fully fulfill all my legal obligations. That's not the idea. You can make it like that if you insert further questions that make sure that your legal requirements are complied with, but we are not going to put there all the legal questions that could possibly arrive. That is your responsibility. So in that sense, for us, it's not a legal compliance tool. And it's also not a certification tool. And because the questions of the high-level expert group are meant to make you reflect and think, But we know that in parallel, and there have been events on this as well during the AI week, there are standardization and certification procedures ongoing on AI. Well, this is just a tool that helps you reflect. It's not a certification tool as such. However, it can help with compliance and certification because, first of all, it will help you reflect on and consider ethical issues that you need to take into account. That's also the whole purpose of the assessment list of the high-level expert group. And it will also help you to justify your design and use choices, because by forcing you to think about it from the very start of your project, you're also going to have to document step by step why you're taking certain actions. For instance, why is this the definition of fairness that you're using rather than another definition? These are important elements, choices that you need to make. These choices will have normative relevance later on, but it's important to just reflect on them and justify them at the start. And because of the documentation that it allows, it also helps you to keep track of these choices and have them documented, which is helpful to also demonstrate legal compliance, certification, other elements of compliance that you might need to meet. And so it can help also with accountability more generally. And that is what we want with this tool. We want to make it easier for organizations developing and using AI to make sure that they can check in a user-friendly manner, am I meeting these ethical considerations that are important? And can I leave a trace of that so that I can give it to my management or show it to my customers, etc. Okay, with that, Alain, I will leave the floor to you for the demo and I will stop sharing my slides.
Thank you, Nathalie. So it's not really a demo. It's a series of screenshots because of technical issues here with the laptops. But if we can start with the first slide. One sec, it's coming. Okay. So, well, I'm not going to introduce the first slide because you already did, Nathalie. But on the second slide, we wanted basically at the development level three things. We wanted to have a collaborative tool, and we wanted to have an open source tool and a private tool. And open source, why? Because it would allow us to release the code and allow anyone with very easy instructions to host their own instance of the tool on their own servers or their own cloud of their choice. So that was the first thing. And by doing that, we would just by design making it private so that people would be the owners of their own questions and their own and their own discussions around the implementation of their AI. And on the collaborative side, we implemented a team functionality. And so I'm going to come to that now. So can we maybe move to the next slide? So, and so as I said, it's going to be open source. The code is not yet accessible. It's in GitHub, and we're hoping to make it accessible in the month of May. Still need to clean a few things and add a few more features, but it'll be available, and all the instructions should be there for you to use it and I hope own it and add whatever features you want to add. Can we move to the next slide? And then on the collaborative aspect of it, the way it starts is that you start by creating a team, and the team has different members that include the management, the procurement team, the legal team, the AI experts team, the front-end developers, the back-end developers, and anyone that you can imagine. And of course, you can modify these, and you can choose and build the team you want that suits your organization. In this example, I'm just showing a few persons. Next slide, please. And this is how the tool looks like. So it's a series of questions that come from the outside, as Nathalie explained. Is very much inspired on a project development in an agile way. So it's basically the things you have to do, the things you're busy with answering, and the things that you consider to be done. And also the bar on top shows the different stages of the development cycle. So whether the tool is in development, whether it's parts of it might be on staging already or on production. And it's organized in 7 chapters. So those you can see on the left of the screen. So fundamental rights, human agency and oversight, and so on. And so each chapter has a different series of questions. And the idea is that once you click on a question, you're opening a card that is basically a discussion that you're having with your team. And as you're having that discussion with your team, basically the questions that are there to help you reach a conclusion. So if we look at one in detail, can we go to the next slide, please? That's what a card looks like. So it's one question, and inside that question, there's several small questions where you can discuss with your team. You can mention members of your team. You can assign different cards to members of your team, and of course, all of this is recorded, and you can use it in at the end to export a report, as Nathalie explained. It was one of the requirements. And so with that, we were doing our best to make it user friendly. We move to the next slide. There's there's notifications on the tool, so you get when your name is mentioned, you get a notification or an email. Of course, you can change that in the settings, and it allows you to answer these questions in a collaborative way. Next slide. At the end of it, once you're done, you can, and this is my last slide, you can see an overview of all the answers that you have given with a score and a detail of all these answers. And this basically you can export, you can share, you can print, or you can publish. And this is the final conclusion of the tool. So basically, it allows you to build a report around the assessment, and that's it for the demo. I give the floor back to you, Nathalie.
Yes, thank you very much, Alain. So that already hopefully gives you an idea of how the tool looks like. And the idea is also that very soon you'll be able to play with it yourself and basically test it out and let us know how it functions, whether there are things that don't function well or that you'd like to change. And so we'll keep you posted as soon as that's possible. But in the meantime, we just wanted to take stock here, show you what we worked on so far, and maybe see if there's some questions on your end. So I'm just gonna have a look at the chat, and please feel free to type in potential questions that you have. If you don't have questions at this stage, that's fine too. Or maybe you have some feedback that you'd like to share on how you think the tool should be, or what would be a beneficial feature. So will anyone be able to access the application? So the idea is that the application, and Alain, you will correct me, it will be on your own device. So we will not be able, so everyone can basically adapt the tool for their own needs in a way. Alain, maybe you complement that?
Yeah, no, that's totally right. So you can just use it on your own cloud, but we are hosting, if we can call it a sandbox, and you can already register on that website. So the URL is on the first or second slide, I think, if we can go back to that one, please. Just one less, back. Yeah, there. So it's altai.ai4belgium.be. You can already go there, register, create projects, invite team members, and so on. But this is just a sandbox, so it's not meant to be used for real projects. It's just for testing purposes. And the code, as I said, will be released in the coming weeks, hopefully the 10th of May.
And it would be
So we have a
great
question in the chat, apparently. You want to take it, Nathalie? It's a bit far from me.
Yes, I just wanted to say it would indeed be great if you go to that sandbox and test it out, because it's by playing with it and testing it out that we get the best feedback. So Niels, the link to the sandbox, and perhaps someone should put it in the chat. Let me do it straight away. It's altai.ai4Belgium.be. So I think Christophe's question, when the tool will be available on GitHub, that Alain already answered that. So hopefully it will be as soon as possible. And the idea is also that there will then be documentation available. Once the tool is fully, up and all the features are there that we envisaged, we're also going to make some noise around its more formal launch. So the idea is definitely to make noise about this, because we invested quite some time and effort in this project, and BOSA is also financing its development, with the idea that as many as possible people use it for their own purposes. So are there any other questions or comments?
We have questions in the room.
Okay.
It's not clear for me if the tool leverages some other AI techniques to provide better questions, or if the questions that the tool provides are just static.
No, the questions are static. However, we've thought about using AI techniques to help you have a conversation with the tool eventually, but it's not part of the first release. But we discussed that, and it's something that we have to discuss further and eventually implement at some point if we decide to. But maybe it's not using any AI right now. Yeah, sorry.
Yeah, and maybe let me complement that. So the idea of this tool is that there has been an expert group at EU level that took about 2 years to work on this, that piloted it, refined these questions, and they're quite comprehensive. And so we didn't want to reinvent the wheel. We wanted to make sure that the questions that in the high-level expert group's document were developed, that these are also reflected in there. And leave the integrity of those questions. So you can, of course, adapt. You can put your own questions in there if you want to build on it. That should be possible. But the idea is not to reinvent the wheel. There are questions, there is a list there, and that should be the starting point. So at a minimum, to make sure that people don't just, say, I only care about this one question and I don't care about all the rest. Well, it's a trustworthy AI assessment tool. The idea is that you should care about all the requirements for trustworthy AI that we identified.
Other question. How do you score the response to a question to reach the final star shape result at the end?
That's a good question. So the way it works is that you have inner questions and final questions. So as we said, we have a lot of small questions that help you answer the last question. And basically it's just a ponderation on, basically if you have 4 options, one is a very bad one or unknown, so you don't know the answer to. Or on the other side of the curve, you have a very good answer. You're confident of your AI implementation, and so that would be a score up from 0 to 4, for example. And then we take the sum and we normalize, and this is how you have the score. And so the blue line is basically the scores of the helper questions, the ones that help you answer the final questions. And the red line is the score for the conclusion.
So most of the time it's multiple choice.
It is always a multiple choice, yeah.
Okay. Other question. Do you give leads or references to other tools if you are stuck on a question?
There are plenty of references inside the tool, and so that's the text that Nathalie was referring to, and that text has a full list of references that go outside of the tool to help you read more. Yes.
Thank you.
Any other questions in the room? No. In the chat, maybe, Nathalie? I don't know.
I don't see any questions coming now. So I think we got most of it covered, probably.
Great. So I think with that, we can close this session, and the next one is starting in half an hour. So we can have a half an hour break, have some coffee. And for the ones in line, we'll be back in half an hour at 4:30. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, everyone, for attending. And don't hesitate also to send feedback once you tested the sandbox later on. We're always happy to hear some comments.